I'm calling this a quick trip through Panopoly, and I'm also using yesterday's version of the slides, which means there's a number of slides missing, since that's what I had on the pen drive. So we'll see what happens here. It's going to be interesting. Um, some of you may be wondering, who is this balding dude up here in front of the room? I'm Steve Hansen. I run a Drupal consulting company and mostly these days web hosting business in northwestern Wisconsin. I'm a recovering system administrator. I've been working as a system admin most of my life and have the last few years been doing Drupal stuff, and I run this company at home with a bunch of other consultants. So, oh, I see. Different user interface. No. Yeah. So anyway, Panopolly is a Drupal distribution. It's like a lot of other Drupal distributions. It's Drupal Core, and it has a lot of other modules and themes and a little bit of example content and stuff, and integration and glue between all that stuff in an attempt to give you a fuller out-of-the-box experience. I mean, I know you've all done the setting up a Drupal site initially, and you have this ugly thing, and it says, there's no content here. Like, you didn't know that. So most of the Drupal distributions try to give you something that actually works more out of the box. So this can be really useful to use a distribution for a particular use case where you might get some of the stuff and tools you're going to need pre-built, or just to make it easier to build new sites. I mean, I know you've all gone through the business of installing Drupal Core, and now I got to put in all these modules, and then going clickety, 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 click for a day and a half, turning the modules on and stuff. I mean, things like Drush make all of this a whole lot easier once you get to use that stuff, but and excuse the fact that I keep sounding like a boy going through puberty. I have this allergy thing going on. My voice cracks all the time. So a distribution can be really good for use case, or just to make it easier to build new sites, or in the case of Panopolly, one of the really important things here is it's a good base on which to build other distributions. We're doing that right now, where we're taking Panopolly as a base and throwing in some other stuff I like to use on all of my sites and building kind of a bigger distribution out of it, because a lot of my clients tend to be in the same kind of range. They're mostly nonprofit sites, and they have a lot of common things that they need. So distributions can be really helpful. Just wondering how badly cut off that is. But other cases, they set up a lot of rules and configurations, which you then find yourself battling all the way down the road. I think, a really good example of that was the original conference organizing distribution, or COD. It had its idea about how you ran a conference, and God damn it, that's how you were going to run your conference. And a couple of us tried to use that to build the Drupal Camp Wisconsin site a couple of years back, and just finally, gave up and really wished we'd just done it from scratch, because it would have been easier just to build the views and all that kind of good stuff. But one of the things I like about Panopolly is I think it's in that sweet spot where it gives you an awful lot of the tools you need and set up in a reasonable way, and mostly then has the courtesy to get out of your hair. So that's really nice. A lot of distributions, I think, are just way too ambitious. It's like, I used this once, I'm going to put it in. And you end up spending a lot of time disabling modules and then finding out, oh, now that I've disabled this, nothing works right anymore, even though I don't see what this has to do with the things that don't work right anymore. I think Panoply is just about enough. It's pretty modular. It lets you mostly disable things without breaking everything else, although there are still a few things that you might want to change that are a little problematic. Yeah, well, yes. Well, I think the ones I have already have issues. Yeah. Panoply is mostly a whole lot of Drupal modules along with some upgraded views and some really improved administrative interface, which is one of the things I like. There's some example stuff. It gives you a lot of functionality out of the box. It's very panels oriented, so if you're one of those people who hates panels, hates, will never use them, I can't stand panels, it's probably not the distro for you, although strictly speaking, you really don't have to use panels, but it'd be kind of silly in this case. Has a really nice functional WYSIWYG configuration, and I mean, I'm sure you've all done sites where just getting the WYSIWYG to work and do predictable things has been a major project. Well, this all works pretty well. It's TinyMCE, and changing it from TinyMCE to CK Editor is one of those things that doesn't work real well currently.
I mean, you could just disable our WYSIWYG entirely.
You could, right? But then you're losing a lot of the really nice stuff too.
There's an issue for
I know there is,
editor, but no one's really stepped up to finish that.
Yeah.
So it's TinyMCE.
Yes. It gives you a whole lot of help with responsive design. Panels and images and all of that stuff kind of just works out of the box, and that's like really nice. And takes advantage of a lot of the things in panels, like in-place page editing, and I'm going to blow through a lot of this, and then we'll go and look at some of it, I hope. And there's a lot of nice glue in between all of this stuff, so there are just a whole lot of things you really don't have to fix up yourself. So I think it's a really nice head start on building a site, especially if it fits in well with the things you typically do, and it does fit in pretty well for me. It's really wonderful for building your own distribution. I'm, as I said, working on one that's going to be for our own internal use, and I'm trying to build a distribution for this idea I've had for the last 3 years that I never get around to actually coding, which is sort of a big conglomeration of news and discussion about news and calendars and all kinds of good stuff. One of the things I've done is build online newspaper sites, and I've done a few of those, so I'm trying to pull out all of the things that I know do and don't work from that world. It can save you an awful lot of time that you typically get sucked up on making talk to each other and integrate well. So you have panels, you have a WYSIWYG, you have kind of a neat thing where you can just kind of on the fly build yourself something and stick it in a page and then reuse it later. I use that a lot. It has responsive everything. It uses panels IPE. It has media module and all that good stuff built in pretty well. And it all kind of talks to each other. Things you might not like. If you don't like panels, like I said, this is probably not the distribution for you. A lot of my clients tend to really like panels because they're like that. I have a lot of really visual customers, and panels speaks to them. It's currently pretty heavily tied to TinyMCE if you want to use all of the built-in WYSIWYG stuff. As with an awful lot of these distributions, if you don't use features and you just kind of do everything on the fly and you don't use a code management system, you may find upgrades are kind of like surprising because Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. It would be nice if some of it was a little better documented. I mean, I've been spending a lot of time going like, it's the typical thing. How do I, oh, like that. I see. And so just part of the reason I'm doing this, I want to show you some of this stuff so it's not quite, you're kind of confronted with a bigger version of Drupal, which has things in it that you may not understand. So as with everything, you pays your money and you takes your choice, or you don't pays your money and you takes your choice, and you kind of have to decide whether this pile of features you get out of the box is worth understanding the stuff you haven't looked at and how it works together. Upgrades. I'm bringing this up because I've got a client and they built themselves a Panopolly site. Well, no, actually they built themselves a OpenAtrium site, which is more so, and we'll talk about that too. But gist of it is, you try to upgrade to your new version, and what you really want to do is do the upgrade kind of like you do any other Drupal upgrade, and then revert all your features, right? Because some of the views and stuff may have changed. In OpenAtrium, they probably have changed. And if you do that and you've gone in and modified any of those views or anything, all your modifications have just disappeared. So if you're going to go and change stuff in any of these distributions, you really got to do a features override on them so that you can keep what you did in a predictable way. But other than that, it's pretty much just like doing any normal Drupal version upgrade. Another thing you probably need to keep in mind when you're dealing with distributions is, unless you really know what you're doing and you have a really good reason, you probably don't want to go in and upgrade modules that are in the distribution, that are part of the profile, because, well, Panopolly is nowhere near as difficult about this as some of them are, but sometimes you've got modules that have been patched or changed in some subtle way to work with other stuff, and then you upgrade them, and now you got this unpredictable behavior. Usually I'll only do that if there's been a security release for something and I really, really know it could hurt a client, that particular client. But one nice thing about Panopolly is the new versions get cut really quickly. I mean, all things considered, really quickly from security problems, which is one of the reasons I keep seeing new releases that don't have feature changes, but you've had a whole lot of security releases recently. Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
About the
Everybody make comments.
about the not making updates to modules that are included in Panopoly. I forget what version we added it, but there is now a feature that it will yell at you for doing that.
Yes,
it puts warnings on the reports page. So
yeah.
and it won't show you this module has a new version available for things that are included in Panopoly to try and prevent people from getting into that problem.
Right. Yeah. That's right. It is somewhat less of a problem because you almost have to. Well, I mean, if you go in and upgrade it in Drush, right?
Right.
It's just gonna get upgraded. But yeah, it's hard to do through the GUI now. You have to be determined.
Even Drush, like we hook into Drush up for people who like to just run Drush up and make it pretend like none of the updates beyond Panopoly exist, but you can still do Drush DL.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, this is one of the Panopolly developers here, so. So there are other distributions that are based on OpenAtrium that are out there in the contrib modules, and so it is getting used for that purpose. OpenAtrium is certainly the biggest, ugliest one I'm aware of. I've been doing some OpenAtrium sites, and I feel like it's a really mixed blessing, because it is one of those things where you end up sometimes going, but I really don't want to do it that way, and now how do I change it? OpenAtrium's intended to do portal-like kinds of sites, typically intranet kind of things, but you can do external stuff with it too. It's got a lot of actually kind of neat things for document management and running discussions and having events and what's essentially a really overgrown organic groups implementation with a bunch of other stuff added in. So it's really kind of neat for a lot of things. And this is actually what I'm building this project I'm working on out of. But I keep running out of money and time. And there are a bunch of other ones. There's Open Academy, which is supposed to be for schools, Open Church, which like I only know exists. So Open Restaurant for building restaurant, or I guess it's just called Restaurant for building restaurant sites. Web Experience Toolkit, which is kind of interesting because it's got a bunch of things from the Spark project and in-place editing of fields and stuff. It's fun to play with. There's a lot of stuff that hasn't become mainstreamed yet. And you can try all this stuff out at simplytest.me if you want to, play with it. Most of those are in there. So what we're going to do for the rest of the lot of time we have left is go in and look at a site that's based on Panopolly. It's a really, really simple site because it's one of those things where I'm primarily doing it because I'm thinking about ideas. So let's say you're a small hosting company in northwestern Wisconsin. Just imagine that. And you're thinking about rebranding your hosting as something called CMS Farm. So if you were doing that, you might think about what that site might, what you might be putting in there and how you might build it. So this is all sort of like hardly themed at all. And now that's not working. Looks great here.
You gotta drag it over and then
That's just bizarre. It's just complete.
I'm seeing your mouse on the projector now. Or now it's gone. Was there?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it here anymore either.
And now it's back on the projector.
You've got extended desktop instead of mirror. Usually with a del, it's like a function F something toggle. I think it's F3.
Well, it seems. Oh, here we go. Let's try that. Aha! I don't know why it changed its mind about this. Now I got a little bitty screen, but what the hey, at least it's working. Okay, so, and that looks weird too. So we got here a really, really, oh, I guess I got to log in on this time. Oh, great, I can't remove my password on this one. but I think I can remember the admin. Yeah, all right. Fine. Nothing like complete confusion. Okay, so this is a really sort of barely themed a little bit site. As you'll see here. So it's responsive Bardic, and it's just sort of like what responsive Bardic does out of the box. One of the things is if you're doing a lot of stuff with panels, the theme is in some ways less important because a lot of the stuff you would have been doing in the theme you're going to be doing in panels anyway. So this is the really ugly front page. It's got a little flex slider slideshow of what kind of hosting plans we have, which really need some theming love, but that's just sort of stupid. We've got a map that works better on a wider screen. We got a little blog section here. Must be able to. All right, screw it. We've got a blog section, we got some videos, we got some other stuff, some of which I just tossed in just to have some content. But one of the things you'll see here is this, I don't know, how many of you have used panels a lot? Okay. So we're using the in-place editor here, and down at the bottom of the page, we've got customize this page and change layout. So, you know, for example, if you don't like, this is doing some odd stuff on here too. You have a bunch of, is it so small? I guess. You have a bunch of pre-designed layouts, which you can use, and this just isn't displaying it all the way I expect it to. You have any idea why this is? That it doesn't say any of the names, or?
It doesn't say the names.
It doesn't say the names?
No,
I thought it
just
said the
using
names.
There's an
Okay.
issue to make it say the names.
Okay. Oh,
Maybe
in
that's
the
what you
in-place
see.
editor, yeah, okay. Gotcha. So you can pick a different layout, and it'll rearrange the stuff into the layout, or you can customize the page. So here we got the page, and this is a slideshow up here, and you got a button for settings, so you can, in this case, kind of pick which of the multiple presentations you have. Let's look at some of this other stuff. So this map, which actually normally looks better on everything but this, there's a widget where you can just add a map. So what I did here was I just put in, told it I wanted to add a map. I told it it's Truskeen Consulting LLC, Menominee, Wisconsin, which is because Google knows where my company is, but it doesn't know where my address is. It's about 5 miles off from my address. I've got no idea why that is. And we have a little WYSIWYG editor here in which we can put in some body content. So this is kind of the default of what the WYSIWYG editor looks like in Panopolly. You got kind of a minimal assortment of the buttons that most everybody uses. And then you have this little kitchen sink button, which turns on a bunch of the other ones. So that's kind of nice because they stay away from cluttering up your screen, but you can get the extra ones if you want. And of course you can change which ones show up, and you got the normal pick your text format widget down here. Okay, so that's the kind of content. So, this is a blog. this. So what I did was I wrote a view, made a content pane presentation out of the view, and just sort of put it into place. So you can do all kinds of cool stuff with this, like if you wanted to add something in, say in the sidebar part, and you have a whole bunch of categories which you can turn on and off for different content types and hide stuff you don't want people to see and like that. But you know, these are kind of the typical activity widgets. I have one aggregator feed in here that you could add in. You got all your menus. So let's say you wanted to put the user menu onto this page. We're just going to take it and we're going to pick it and add it in, and there it is on the left hand side. And you can drag and drop it. So let's say we want to move it down here. Oop. Oh, I accidentally hit the remove button. You can drag it down here and then save the page, and there it is where you put it. So this is nice if you got people who want to go and change things kind of on the fly and change layouts and move things around. So you not only have a panelizer, this is all panelizer, you not only have a panelizer view for a content type or an individual landing page, but you also have them for individual pages. So here we got a blog. We got a blog entry. This is teaching you about why you want Cloudflare. So if we went in and edited that, this is kind of your normal editing thing. It's the media module. I've put in a YouTube video there. As a real simple blog entry, you once again have the stuff, but you'll notice there are some administrative changes here. This doesn't look like the default layout of editing a page in Drupal. It has things rearranged a little bit. It's simplified by default. Most of the publishing option stuff is missing, although you can turn it back on. And a lot of the sites people design these days saying promote to the front page and sticky doesn't really make any sense because it probably doesn't do anything. Because you're probably not using the default front page view. So that stuff disappears. You can create a new revision. You've got a little cleaner authoring information. And you've just got these buttons, save, unpublish, preview, and delete, which is a lot more simple and straightforward and suits most people's lives better. And this is all panels magic of one sort or another. But if you then go to that page and just look at it, you can set up so I can customize this too. So I put, you know, I keep wanting to remind everybody what the hosting plans are, right? So that's over there on the left-hand side. So let's say I want to take this page and change it. I don't on that page want to have the hosting plans over there. We can just trash that. And let's add in something else. Well, I really like Richard Thompson's. Oh, I see we got a little. So I'm going to put Richard Thompson's video on that page for no other reason that I was watching it trying to learn how to play this song. And so now instead of the hosting plans, we've got that, and I could change the layout if I wanted. interesting. And so it's going to try to want to put your content into reasonable places, which is probably not really what I want in this case, but well, that's not bad. So now Richard's over on the right, and I've got a bunch more pins to stick things into down here, so I could make a much more complicated page. Or I can send it back and say, oh, I just want this to look like all the other blog entries now. And there it is reverted. Okay.
How well does it do with responsive?
It does pretty well. Though I seem to have broken this and lost the video. If we go back and look at the front page, well, okay, so the map is kind of sucky. And I wouldn't normally do a map that way, but I just wanted to demonstrate how easy it is. But, you know, if we take this, well, I can't make it wide because that's all the wider my screen is. But, you know, once we get down into, hit the break point, it's collapsed itself. And if I had a wider screen, I could show that it really does stretch quite well, but and the images change. It also works pretty well with the picture module if you want to put in the picture module. It doesn't come with the picture module, yeah.
There's an issue for that, though.
There is an issue for that. Yeah, I thought that was the case. But it works pretty well with the picture module, and if you like using that's cool. You can use picture with it real happily, and that's actually what I've been doing in a lot of sites. Oh, let's see, what else do I have on my list here? Oh, a stylizer. This is never where I think it's going to be. If you got some things and you want to do simple styles, and this, you know, it sort of depends on what kind of person you are. Some of this is stuff that would probably actually be better off being put into your theme, but if you want to do some simple styles for panels, you can do it with a stylizer. Like I got one here called Blocky. And this is pretty simple. You tell it you got this style, and you can go in and change it. So I didn't mean to export it.
Settings.
I meant to get settings, yes. It's funny how confusing it is to use a different operating system and different laptop. Okay, so this is a real simple, you know, block kind of style. All I did was change the fonts a little bit and change the color of the header. So you got this, you know, cute little WYSIWYG interface here, and I changed the header background. So let's say, I like real bright green today. You can go in and change the fonts. You can put borders around it. You can change the padding. And do all of that. And I use that someplace. Oh, yes. So this is style, the Drupal.org feed down there is styled with a blocky style. And so when you go in, if you are editing the page, you can just go in and change the style on anything. And I got a couple of ones. I got one that's called Host and Plan, one that's for the slideshow. And you can go in and assign any of those or just get the default pane style, or you can write one on the fly. So it's plain because that's all I got in here. And so now you're doing the same thing as in Stylizer, but I'm writing one just for this block, which, you know, like I think is a real bad idea, but you can do it. So that's handy for some things if you're one of those people who likes to do stuff in GUIs. Um, Another kind of interesting thing you can do is, let's go back down here on the sidebar, and you can just add a lot of custom things. So say I wanted to just let's do something simple, build a little text block in here. And you get a preview as you work on it. If I could just keep my fingers off that. So that's ugly. But one thing you can do is you can make it reusable. So say you thought you wanted to use this later. And there it is. And you can do a lot of things with that, like this map I added in just by telling it I wanted to add a map and put in an address. And now if I wanted to reuse that block later, it's going to show up on the editing page for customizing pages as a little panel you can stick in. Okay, so that was all I really had for today, unless you got questions or want to see something. Yes.
So I've just installed Panopolly here, and looks like one of the, I don't know, sort of the assumption is that it's going to have some sort of access to my file system, whether that's FTP or, like, I had to change the permissions on my sites all modules, at least temporarily, to get some things to go.
It's the apps installer. There are a few apps that you can install. FAQ, news,
I mean,
yeah.
Is that typically what people do? Is that what you do?
So the apps thing in the installer is totally optional.
Right.
If you don't want to configure your server to do it, if you don't have SSH or FTP access, like there's a skip button.
Sure.
But that's just the way that apps works. So we have like a Panopolly app store, and like after the site's installed, you can go to apps in admin.
So I guess my question is more like, what do you do? What is a common practice for that?
So like if you're making your own distribution, and do you provide apps? Is that the question?
Like, if I
No, I think he's wondering.
is it typical for you to just give Panopolly access to the file system?
No, I think that's not a best practice. It's so the way apps works is it uses the update module, which just has those two methods, right? Like if you happen to have the access to write, then it will use that, or you can give it SFTP or FTP info to upload it. But no, I would never give a Drupal site write access.
So you would use Drush to download the apps,
Or providing SFTP or FTP information if your site was accessible in that way.
It's going to depend a little on your hosting provider and what they provide in their PHP setup.
I'm used to the model where like my site is all in a repo.
Mm-hmm.
So any change that's going to be done to the site is going to go through the repo and get pulled onto the hosting environment.
Right. So apps is probably not for you. The idea is these are modules that users can easily install without having to know what a module is.
Right.
and these modules are not included in Panoply. So when you download Panoply and you set it up, we could have a menu with 500 options, but we're not bundling 500 options. And Panoply really barely uses it. I'm always saying to people like, make a Panoply app, we'll put it in our app store, and it just like really hasn't caught on.
Right.
OpenAtrium has been successful with it. What's the other phase 2 distro that uses apps?
Specific one.
Well, anyway, other
Yeah.
distros have been much more successful. We include it more as an example.
Right.
But like if you wanted to create a distro that's a product and provide your users with a menu of optional apps they could install, like this is how you would do it, right?
Yeah, in your case, you might bring in the apps in your development environment and then just promote them.
Right.
And not make, you probably don't want to make your production server be able to write,
Right.
you know.
And there's a mode for apps where you bundle all of them and don't hold them from a remote server. You can also have an arbitrary number of remote servers or like apps repositories, so you don't have to have. In fact, you probably shouldn't have the Panoply apps available on your child distro of Panoply. You should have your own whatever extension mechanism.
Yeah, I think I used the FAQ app once, and so there's not a lot there.
It's not maintained by the core Panoply team, so I can't really vouch for its quality.
Thanks.
So it's not very technical in Panoply, but I want to try to understand, is Panoply one of the better known distro, I guess, toolkits, or?
Well, certainly Panopoly and the ones that are based on it are, I mean, like OpenAtrium, I think has pretty big uptake. Although you kind of have to really want that set of features to use it. But
So
yeah, I
it
think.
has a whole lot more features in Panoply than others, in terms of modules that are.
Well, OpenAtrium is based on Panoply.
Okay.
It's Panoply extended with a whole lot of other stuff.
I'm just trying to think, are there some that are more geared towards, towards government usage?
Yeah, there are some. Well, this is something I should be able to answer better because,
So
like, I
there's-
do some of that.
I think it's another phase 2 one actually.
Yeah.
Government one.
If you go in and just look at the distributions on Drupal.org,
Open public.
Open Public,
Oh,
thank you.
Okay,
Open Public might be one.
I see, okay.
There are government
There it
sites
is.
built on Panoply too, though, but they've done more. So
Customization.
Right. Panoply is like a generic base that doesn't really have a use case in mind. It's like a
Right.
leveled up Drupal 7 with a lot of the sort of best practices that most people are doing anyway, and some like a sort of framework for you to put your specific use case stuff into.
Okay.
But it doesn't have a use case. Whereas
Right.
like Open Public is like, this is for creating municipality website, right?
Okay, okay, so that's kind of what I was looking at, okay.
I think, I was saying at the beginning of the talk, one of the real problems is that distributions are often a double-edged sword where they're going to give you a whole lot of features for that particular use case, but
Some
they
of which
may
you-
not be the way you want to do it.
Right.
And
right.
some, Open Public, I think, I did look at that once because one of my clients asked about it, their state agency. And in a lot of ways, this fit their use case, and in a lot of ways, it didn't. And they ended up writing their own, actually.
So that's the chapter. So if we were to use just Open Public out of the box with what they have, the maintenance or whatever, the updates, it's being taken care of. But if you were to add additional custom, modules or things into that to meet your specific needs, then who takes care of maintaining those?
Well, you would take care
So
of
we
them.
would do that.
I think my concern there is more along the lines of they've already put something into open public and done it in a way that does not meet your needs.
Right.
And then at some point you have to ask yourself, well, am I better off using that framework or building something from scratch or building it on a more general distribution like Panopolly? I mean, you know, there's no way to tell you what the right answer is there.
The place that Panoply has been successful in government is where you don't have one site to build, but you have like 200 sites to build. So then you take Panoply and on top of it, make your own distribution that has all the stuff you need for those 200 sites, and then you deploy it 200 times, right? Whereas
You still have to maintain your Monopoly base.
right.
But that would be the one time. And it's the core, I guess, the template that you're using, and then you can maintain all these 100 sites, agency sites under that.
Right. So you can maintain the code base and then deploy everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. And depending on your hosting provider, there's different tools for that. Like Pantheon has some really great tools for having your own distro and then a whole bunch of sites, and then you just say go and it updates them all.
We're doing it on the cloud, on Amazon.
On Amazon. So I mean, I don't know what sort of infrastructure the sysadmin people have that have set that up for you have put in for deploying stuff. So they might need to build something to help you with that, but it's totally possible.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, if you have a core that, you know, I mean, a lot of people are in the situation they got 100 sites and they're 90% the same.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have all that in the distribution, then you just got to tweak them. And distros are really good for that kind of thing, or building your own distro for your own particular use.
Right.
I mean, you're essentially always going to be building your own distro. The question is whether you build on top of Drupal, which thanks to the Drupal community is maintained, you know, or whether you take the next step and have another layer of maintainers doing work for you. But at some point you have to fork off and do what you want to do with it.
Right.
And you're really responsible for maintaining that and keeping it secure.
So the philosophical question is it better to use the Drupal supported one and build your own, or use one of these add-ons? I guess maybe there's no answer. I guess
so if your goal is to align with one of these distributions, then, you know, that's great.
Well, my goal is to do whatever it takes to maintain our sites properly. Which one would be the better option for them?
So
it'd be
well, I was going to say which one, because if you ask me which one, I'll say Panoply, but I'm biased. But like the advantage of taking like another step up thing, like taking a distro, is there's all this shared work. So there are already a number of government users of Panoply. There's a load of educational users, UC Berkeley, UC Davis, Princeton, U of M. Like they all have developers who have based their distros on Panoply, so all of their shared work feeds back into it. So theoretically, you get to pull on that.
Sure. That shared work that's already been done.
It's really a question of alignment of goals. Right? Yeah. Because if they're doing all this work, but they're diverging from the direction you want to go,
sure.
At some point, I mean, really the best thing to do is to say, this is going to be, there are going to have to be ongoing resources dedicated to the maintenance of our system, whether that's, you know, widely diverged. And he was making the point earlier that sometimes it's actually better to just create and maintain your own distribution rather than taking a distribution that's going like, you know, 60% of the way and then fighting for that last 40%, and then you're always having to work around something. But only you can make that call.
Yeah. And I think that's harder or more of a risk with distros that have a use case in mind, like OpenPublic or OpenAcademy or whatever, whereas Panoply tries to be super generic and tries to make it so that you can remove the components that like totally don't work for you. Like there's the Panoply pages component, which defines the 2 default content types of Panoply. You might have a totally different idea about how you want your content to go, so just don't use Panoply pages, right? Or you might have a totally different idea about how WYSIWYG should work, so just don't use Panoply WYSIWYG. But hopefully there's something in there that you can still depend on the shared work for, or not, you know, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think a good example of that is I had been working as a developer for a online newspaper in the Twin Cities for quite a while. And they kept saying, Well, I know, but you got to do all this custom coding and stuff for us and custom work and building things, and we don't want to. We want something that works out of the box, and so there are these newspaper distributions. And I said, well, sure, we can explore that. And so, I set up a real simple example site on one of those distributions. They went and looked at it and said, well, that's fine, except we don't do it this way, and we don't do that way, and we don't like the way this looks, and we don't like the way you edit this, and we want a completely customized workflow for that. And so it was kind of like, okay, so there's nothing in here that we can use. And it's just going to be in the way. Interesting thing that happened there, though, was the head of the nonprofit that runs the newspaper left. And in the process of his leaving and the new people taking over, they all decided, we know WordPress. And so it's a WordPress site now. And I'll try and be kind. It looks really nice. They're using the same theme almost every other nonprofit newspaper in the country is using now, because somebody built a theme for nonprofit newspapers. They threw out 2/3 of the content because it didn't fit into their template. It just sounded. It does very little that it used to do, and they changed every URL on the site when they built it. So their traffic is about a quarter of what it was a couple months ago. At some point, all you can say is, well, I didn't do it, and walk away, which is what I've done. But on the other hand, it's probably been good for them because they're a group of people who are probably better off, much as I hate to say it, having something they feel they cannot change, because they kept changing everything, and sometimes they were really bad judgments. And now they have a fixed template that they can't afford to change. Well, that's the other thing. I think they're going to be out of business by the end of the year. But
That's an aside.
Well, that would have happened no matter what. So this was why I couldn't understand why they wanted to completely redesign the site when they're going out of business. But all the grant money for nonprofit newspapers is pretty much dried up in the last year, so they're hurting.
So one of the things we've seen at Iowa State is a change from investment in a lot of what used to be custom development. And a lot more time and resources are spent on the integrator role, where you're really just, you're taking these things that are fairly mature from different sources, whether they be Drupal modules, Drupal themes, and so on, and just, changing them a little bit, but making them work in the ecosystem that is our ecosystem. And that's ongoing work because modules change constantly. New versions of Drupal come out. New technologies are invented. Mobile. We were talking about mobile 10 years ago. So it's really the sort of maintenance and integration that is really the long-term cost.
Yeah, and there are some other interesting side effects there too. Like I deal with a lot of smaller nonprofits, and a lot of what I do is spend time talking them out of doing custom development because they just cannot afford it. And the conversation is always like, well, but you'll build those modules for us, and then they'll be done, and and then we'll never have to pay for it again. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. The newspaper I was talking about had a module for geospatial databases that did some really neat stuff. And it was orphaned after Drupal 6. And I was not going to port it because clearly the people who wrote it didn't understand it, and I knew I didn't. And it looked to me like, here's a $20,000 job just getting this module to work again. And it never quite worked right in 6. It had all kinds of interesting side effects, like So what they were using it for was you put in a place in the Twin Cities and it would map it. Well, that was all cool, but it would also say, oh, yeah, that's in the Riverside neighborhood, and then build all this content because it was in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood, but it would know, which neighborhood it was in just by the address. Oh, it was actually kind of cool, but it was often wrong, which confused the hell out of people when, it's it would be on the map here, but it said it was in that neighborhood over there, and the way it was written, there was no way to fix it, right, other than fix the code, which I never did figure out what was wrong with it. But anyway, they invested a lot of effort into this and built their site basically around it, and it was one of the reasons I never upgraded to Drupal 7. Well, it was what we were in the process of doing when they decided to do WordPress. So yeah, these module decisions can really come back and bite you later if you use something that like nobody else uses. Which is one of the nice things about distributions like this, because they have, a sizable user base, and like there will be a Drupal 8 version of Panopolly. Yes, and so I have to assume that means, if you build something largely based on this, you're not going to be in that position of, oh, I built all that functionality and now I can't move it into the next version. That's real unfortunate when that happens. And it's one of the things that makes people love WordPress, because everything's always theoretically upward compatible, I say theoretically because I've got a whole bunch of, I don't really do WordPress, but we've got some clients who use it, and it rolled out a new update the other night and a bunch of the sites broke, but it updated itself and was supposed to be compatible, but it is one of the things people I find hate about Drupal, is because they feel like every couple of years they got to do a whole new site again.
I think with Drupal 8 they've been paying attention to that.
Yeah.
So
I think one has finally realized it's an issue for the community. Yeah. Anything else? Any good stories?
Drupal is a support group.
we get the WordPress thing all the time. I mean, it looks so good.
Right.
And entering a page is just so easy. But then all of this other stuff that Drupal does, they just kind of expect that WordPress will do that too, and it doesn't.
Right. So I've been getting calls, even though I am not their developer anymore. So when we used to want this, you'd just write a view for it and put in a couple panels and it would work. So how do we do that in WordPress? And I said, well, you don't. There must be something like that. I said, well, no, there really isn't. So yeah, I mean, I think as you were saying, it really all depends on the alignment of your goals and that's certainly a good example of that. Again, nothing against WordPress. If I was writing a blog or something like that, I hate the user interface, but that's because I'm not used to it. Okay, thank you all.